Folks, we have an emergency. Laurie McBride has destroyed our entire space fleet, and my men are sitting ducks awaiting death. Let me read you a letter from Brent Spiner about what happened. I'm Skyping with Zach Knight right now. All the Zach Knight Jesuits are dead. Dearest Gail, such a cataclysm of events has transpired over the past few hours. What began as an ordinary day for the men and our patrons turned into a waking nightmare. I have so much to tell you. I'll start from the beginning. He's still Skyping me. There I was in the briefing room reviewing our upcoming mission with our crew of $25 tier patrons. In our humble little squad, we had patrons John Balcora, Guy Jackman, Lila, and Clark. All right, everyone, I began. As you all read the memo I sent to your emails yesterday, the Church of Gail's space sheet is currently en route to Moonsaco for the purposes of building a new prison to house the gargantuan fat chick Sarah Avery. On the projector screen beside me, pictures of a very fat Sarah Avery flicked across the screen. The photos depicted Sarah gobbling down cake, puking, crying, and then gobbling down cake some more. In each photo, she was visibly seen to be growing bigger until eventually her fat, gelatinous body was oozing its way out of her prison bars. Sarah has once again failed on a diet, and she is now nearing critical mass. If we don't get her weight under control, she's at risk of becoming a black hole again. Our plan is to construct a new prison specifically for Sarah Avery on Moonsaco. This new prison will be large enough to house her while also being exceptionally isolated so that we can keep her on a long-term starvation diet. This new prison base will be known as Moonsaco. I pressed the button on the projector's remote to flick through the pictures again. The next picture showed a cartoon drawing of an anthropomorphic taco. The taco had a big smile on its face with its arms in the air and was standing next to a picture of the moon. Moonsaco, formerly known as Earth's moon, is home to a race of sentient tacos and burritos. Some of you all may not be familiar with Moonsaco. It's important to understand the culture there as we work with the inhabitants on building this prison, so I prepared a little history lesson. I pressed a button on the slide that began to play one of Gail's videos from early 2015. Back in January 2015, the Jesuits sent a Pukaki bomb to Earth aimed at Mexico. The Pukaki was a nuclear bomb filled with poop. The projector flipped to a picture of the Pukaki bomb sailing toward Mexico. As the citizens of Mexico scurried about in a panic, scientist Bill Nye was able to intercept this bomb using a shield that converted the Pukaki into delicious tacos and burritos. To our horror, the technology used to turn the Pukaki into tacos and burritos also created a giant sentient taco and sentient burrito. Guy Jackman rubbed his chin and thought, "That makes perfect sense." I continued. The giant sentient self-aware taco and burrito then flew into outer space and chased after Church of Gail. Clark raised his hand. "Now wait a minute, you mean the original Church of Gail?" "Nope. Not the original Church of Gail. This was the second version of Church of Gail." I pressed a few buttons on the remote to pull up pictures of previous versions of Church of Gail. Clark asked a very good question, so allow me to catch everyone up. The original Church of Gail was a spaceship built like a giant tower. It moved from place to place using teleportation technology. In late May of 2012, the Jesuits attacked the original Church of Gail with Pukaki bombs, and the fight dragged out into deep space. At the time, the Jesuits had developed a super weapon called the orgasmic telefornication ray, a weapon that could turn masses of people into rapists. In order to protect Gail from being raped, Vladimir heroically rammed the Church of Gail into the Jesuit warship carrying the telefornication ray, destroying the Church of Gail in the process. Our dear Jim Carey died, and the rest of Gail's men barely escaped. The next slides depicted the original Church of Gail in its tower form, followed by a photo of it being destroyed in an explosion, and then a photo of the second Church of Gail. The second Church of Gail was a massive floating city with a central tower in the center. It ran on powerful Jesus technology. That version of Church of Gail was later destroyed during the final battle with Angelina Ballerina. Lila piped in, "And now the Church of Gail isn't even its own spaceship anymore. It's just a group of old warships we've been borrowing from the Jesuits since the fight with Angelina Ballerina. Correct, I said. That was after Zach Knight turned good and the Jesuits split off between the good Zach Knight Jesuits and the bad Laurie McBride Jesuits. John remarked, "It would be nice to have our own spaceship again instead of having to rely on these clunky old Jesuit ships to keep our group together." Agreed, said Clock. Jesuit technology is difficult to work with. Everything is powered by semen. Jesuits are genetically primed for producing lots of cum. Us normies can't keep up. Just keep drinking Gatorade, folks, I advised. That's why there's Gatorade vending machines on every deck. You think that's bad, Lila scoffed? Try being a woman on board. If I want to blow dry my hair in the morning, I gotta blow a guy first. Guy chimed in, "Speaking of which, if you need a hand in producing more semen, Clock, you know where to find me." Okay, back to the subject, I told them, corralling the team back onto the lesson. I clicked the remote to change the slides. In order to escape the sentient taco and burrito, Gail ordered the Church of Gail to fly into the sun. In theory, the church would be able to withstand traveling through the sun thanks to its shields, while the taco and burrito got burnt to a crisp behind it. To everyone's surprise, the taco and burrito survived the trip through the sun, while the heat from the sun simply made them crispy and delicious. The next slide depicted a plate of Mexican food a la carte. The Church of Gail had meanwhile burned up all of its shields and was now a sitting duck for the taco and burrito. That was when the taco and burrito began making love and started flying toward the moon. The interstellar copulation of the giant taco and burrito produced a race of sentient, anthropomorphic beings called moonsakins. The next slide showed a group of happy tacos and burritos having a fiesta. These moonsakins traveled to Earth, where they began wreaking havoc on Earth's society, especially the economy. They began making babies at a rapid pace, and as their population exploded, they all began going on welfare, siphoning resources from the hardworking humans. We couldn't allow the moonsakins to stay on Earth, so we exiled them off of our planet and onto the moon. I flipped to the next slide, showing a sentient burrito placing a moonsakin flag on the moon. Since the moon has no resources, the moonsakins were dependent on trade deals with Earth in order to survive as a society. In exchange for air and water from Earth, the moonsakins sent us their excess babies and aborted fetuses to be served as food at Taco Bell chains. I flicked to the next slide that showed a Taco Bell restaurant and then another that showed happy humans eating delicious tacos. And there you have it, folks. That's the history of Moonsaco. If this is your first trip, it should be quite the experience. Any more questions? With perfect timing, the intercom monitor lit up and a robotic voice came over the loudspeaker with an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, Church of Gail is now arriving at Moonsaco." "Look, guys," Lila exclaimed, calling the other patrons over to the windows. Far down below from space, the landscape of Moonsaco was coming into view. As the church grew closer to the moon's surface, the patrons laid their eyes upon the vast spectacle of a bustling Moonsakin city. Lazy Moonsakins slept peacefully on the sidewalks, while little Moonsakin children played in the streets unattended, occasionally being splattered by drunk Moonsakin drivers. Around every corner were muggings, drug deals, and rape, and a peppy atmosphere of Moonsakin polka chortled from every building. There were colorful fruit stands and steaming food trucks selling delicious food to obese burritos on their lunch breaks. Behind the gas station, two burritos were removing the meat from inside a dead baby taco and stuffing it with cocaine. Well-dressed burritos and beautiful tacos strolled arm in arm down the sidewalks, past great tall buildings and dirty fountains. At the city center square stood a giant marble statue of Bill Nye, his arms outstretched like Jesus. "All right, crew," I said. "We have a few minutes before landing. It's time to get ready." "Hey," Guy pointed. "What's that in the distance? Does Moonsaco have its own moon or something?" Coming into view from deep space was a massive giant pink sphere. As the object accelerated closer and closer to our ship, I knew it was no moon. I raised my hand to my chest to tap my communicator and contact Vladimir when suddenly, boom! A powerful white beam blurred past the window, grazing the ship and plunging deep into Moonsaco. An explosion rocked the ship and sent myself, everyone in the room, flying into the walls. For several moments, we bounced around like rocks shaking inside a tin can. Deaf from the sound and out of breath, I was left temporarily paralyzed on the floor. The voice of Zach Knight came over my communicator. "Brent, it's Zach. It looks like our ship's hull has been breached." "What's happening up there, Zach?" Guy Jackman gasped. "Oh no, the moonsakins!" Down below on the surface of Moonsaco was a giant crater, freshly created by the impact of the massive laser beam. As we all stared into the crater, a white liquid began to ooze to the surface. Like an erupting volcano, the liquid seeped over the rim of the crater and began engulfing the nearby Moonsakin cities. The burritos began drowning, becoming soggy until they died, while barely crispy tacos floated to the surface pregnant. "Zach, what the hell happened?" I asked. "Was that one of our Jesuit weapons?" "No idea, Brent. It looks like..." Zach was cut off as a picture flashed up on the view screen in the room. "Oopsies," Laurie giggled, daintily touching her fingers to her mouth. "Looks like I missed." "Laurie McBride!" we all shouted in unison. "It's me," Laurie confirmed cheerily. "Did you all forget we were at war?" "Oh, I guess you did. All Gail's been doing is making videos about boring presidential cabinet pics and shopping for useless garbage online. Meanwhile, she's left you all floating around in these outdated Jesuit ships while I've been making upgrades to my own Jesuit military." Laurie raised her hands, gesturing to the deck of her new pink spaceship. "Do you like it? I call it the Cum Star. You'll really like all the new toys it comes with." "Well, I hope you got insurance on that big pink disco ball of yours, because you're going down, Laurie McBride," I shouted, then tapped my communicator. "Vladimir, fire the Nukakis." Vladimir roared a Russian war cry, and we watched as several Nukakis launched toward the Cum Star. Each of the Nukakis successfully connected with the surface of the ship and exploded with their payload. To our dismay, the bukkake inside the bombs simply oozed instead of sprayed. Sad semen leaked down the sides of the Cum Star, barely penetrating it. Laurie McBride cackled. "Ha ha ha! Are you serious right now? Your Church of Gail Nukakis are no match for a Jesuit warship." "Brent, it's Zach!" Zach came in over the communicator. "Laurie is kind of right here. Your Nukakis are pretty low yield." "I've been drinking as much Gatorade as I can," Clock replied sheepishly. "Let us help." Zach then turned to shout a command to all Jesuit ships in the fleet. "Fire the Nukakis!" Dozens of high-potency Nukakis burst from the Jesuit warships. With intense vigor and vitality, the Nukakis rushed the Cum Star and threatened a massive payload. In the next instant, defensive missiles fired back from the Cum Star, bursting into parachutes. The giant parachutes opened in front of the Nukakis, completely engulfing them before tying off at the end and sealing them inside. The inert Nukakis exploded weakly inside the parachutes before floating uselessly off into space. "Behold," Laurie declared, "my condom defense missiles. Even Zach Knight hasn't upgraded his fleet to prepare for me. Ha ha ha! Quick," I told our patrons, "we need to get to the torpedo bay." The patrons nodded and followed behind me like a squad as I exited the room, and we all sprinted down the corridor. "What's the plan?" Brent John asked, huffing as he ran. "Some of the spermicide bullets were salvaged from the wreckage of the old Church of Gail," I explained. "They normally wouldn't be compatible with these ships, but we retrofit them using the guidance and propulsion systems from Jesuit missiles." We were suddenly jolted into the walls as the ship shook and Lila screamed. "Ah!" The battle was roaring outside in space. Laurie's Cum Star fired off Nukakis as Vladimir struck back with weak anti-seaman lasers. After the hit, we gathered ourselves and kept running. I continued to answer John's question. "The modified version should work if we can get them loaded into the torpedo tubes." Explosions continued to boom outside, drowning out our voices. "What's with the Jesuits not having spermicide or anti-seaman technology anyway?" Guy asked, shouting over the cacophony. "It's not that they don't have it, it's just that it's sacrilegious for Jesuits. Anything that explodes on contact with semen is kind of like radioactive waste to them." Another explosion rocked our ship. Well, at least before we die, we'll have gotten a good education, Guy joked wryly. Our group reached the torpedo bay, and I instructed the guys to open the vaults and remove the old spermicide bullets now modified into spermicide missiles. The three men hoisted up one of the missiles and began carrying it toward the torpedo tube. That's when one of the guys squeaked, "Ow!" and another stumbled. "Hey, that's my leg," Clock cried. "Sorry, I thought it was your dick," John shouted back with sarcasm. The trio stumbled and tripped over one another, and the missile was dropped. "Hey, what the?" Guy exclaimed. It was too late. The instant the missile made contact with the floor vaporized. A clean, smooth hole in the oblong shape of a missile glided all the way down through the ship. At the very bottom of the hole, there was only open space. Everyone face-palmed and sighed when they realized what had happened. "It's because everything on a Jesuit ship is contaminated with semen," Clock groaned. Lila made a disgusted face. "You know what? That's really gross." Boom! Another hit from the Cumstar quaked through the ship, sending us all stumbling once more. "We have no time to lose," I yelled. "Quick! Let's get the rest of the missiles loaded into the tubes. Carefully this time. We don't want to turn our own ship into Swiss cheese." The patrons hurried on to the task. One by one, each of the missiles was hauled out of the vault and loaded into the tubes. Zach's voice came in over the communicator. "Hey, we're getting obliterated out here, guys. We've already lost all of our ships. Me and 13 are ordering the rest of our crew into the escape pods now. You guys had better follow suit before you get creamed." "We've not lost the fight yet. Just wait until Laurie gets a taste of these spermicide missiles," I responded. "A dirty bomb. Cool. All right, guys. Good luck." The communicator chirped as Zach signed out. "Do you really think this will work?" Lila fretted nervously. "It's our last shot. It better work," John replied. With renewed courage, I slammed on my communicator. "Vladimir, fire the spermicide missiles!" Vladimir shouted in mad Russian over the communicator, and then in crystal clear English, "Firing the spermicide missiles!" A blitzkrieg of spermicide missiles blasted from our torpedoes. With bated breath, we watched as the phallic missiles pierced through space and honed in expertly on the Cumstar. Laurie McBride surveyed the battlefield with muted scorn on her wicked face. As she watched the approach of the incoming missiles, her eyes lit up. She smiled devilishly. "Oh, Brent, did you really try to combine Jesus technology with Jesuit technology? Pathetic!" She pressed a button on her screen and instantly the spermicide missiles froze. My ship's software can link right into the guidance systems of the old Jesuit technology. I am still a Jesuit after all. The spermicide missiles then rotated on their axis until they faced the opposite direction and were forcefully launched back toward our fleet. With a man's force, the missiles began penetrating through each of the ships in our fleet and rained down upon our own shields, throwing us all into an explosion of emergency sirens on board. "Emergency!" Vladimir yelled over the intercom above the deafening blaring of the sirens. "Escape to space pods! I repeat, emergency! Escape to space pods!" With our shields quickly dying and our sirens blaring, I gathered the group of patrons and we all fled to the escape pod deck. Out in the corridors, hundreds of other church members stuffed themselves along the halls and rushed toward the deck themselves. "Oh no," Lila cried. "The space pods only fit 2 people each. We don't have enough for everyone. Some are going to have to stay behind." "Not on my watch," I declared. We arrived at the door of a space pod. After opening the door, I gestured to Lila. "Ladies first." Lila stepped comfortably inside. I then shoved Clock, John, and Guy into the space pod after her, forcing them all in like a can of sardines. The patrons struggled and protested with discomfort. Looking to Guy, I nodded my head and affirmatively said, "No homo," before sitting in his lap and stuffing myself inside the pod with all of them. After entering the passcode into the keypad inside, we were forcefully ejected from the ship. As we sailed like helpless marble through space, none of us could help but watch the remnants of the final battle through the windows. I watched as our former ship's shields finally died, and the raging fire of spermicide bullets began turning it into a giant co-lander. Hundreds of tiny space pods scattered through the stars like dust. Laurie wasn't finished yet. "Don't fall asleep now. I'm ready for my climax," she beamed, her voice blaring over the intercom systems of every remaining ship and escape pod. The giant hole in the center of the cum star opened, and out slid an enormous phallic cannon. My new favorite toy. Prepare for the warm blast. Ha 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 ha! Laurie flipped back her head and laughed wickedly. The head of the phallic cannon opened, its insides glowing with a bright white light. In one massive explosion, it ejaculated a powerful white beam straight through the center of our space fleet. The beam completely decimated the entire remains of the Church of Gail and Jesuit space fleets, burning through them like wet paper before beaming down onto Moonsaco. The beam blew yet another crater deep into the surface of the moon, this one deeper than the last, filling the core of the moon with laser semen and sending a crack that split straight through the moon itself. Molten semen erupted from every crevice, flooding and impregnating every moonsakin on the moon. A somber silence hung heavy in our space pod. There we were, stranded in this tiny tin can, our arms and legs gangled around each other like a perverted game of Twister. Our fleet was gone. The Jesuit fleet was gone. The pink cum star loomed in the distance as the bits and pieces of our warships floated lifelessly in the atmosphere around it and crumbled away into a quiet death. Moonsaco was a disaster zone, its cities in ruins, with likely millions dead or rendered pregnant. Everything we had known in the past hour had been destroyed. To our petrified relief, the cum star soon rotated away and slowly faded back into the blackness of space. Satisfied with her victory and reasonably assuming we were all dead, Laurie was finished with us. Minutes passed, yet it felt like hours. Finally, a voice came through my communicator. Brent, it's Zach. Did you guys make it? We made it, Zach. Myself and our patrons are still alive. Who else survived? Don't know yet. There weren't enough space pods for everyone. The only way me and 13 could fit was for me to stuff my entire penis inside her. I felt my stomach drop with sorrow, worried for the other men on the marriage list and all of our church members. With nowhere to go and nobody to save us, our hive of space pods drifted endlessly into the starry abyss. Just then, the light of the moon flashed off of a tiny object nearing our space pod. It was a little glass bottle floating through space as if drifting on the waves of a starry ocean. Almost as if it had a life of its own, it seemed intended for our pod. Deeply curious, I had to know what was inside it. With trepidation, I pressed a button on the keypad to beam it aboard. I took the glass bottle in my hands. It was sealed with a wooden cork and had a piece of paper rolled up inside. I popped the cork and removed the paper, unveiling its contents. It read, Dear Gail, ha ha ha. These past few weeks have been so much fun for me. You knew Jesus would never make love to you, but you're such a selfish girl. You made brain to brain with him on purpose. You thought you could double dip by screwing Jesus while secretly hoping it would turn out to be Satan instead, so you could have the satisfaction of getting them both. Clever girl. Surprise, Gail. It was me with my strap-on dildo the whole time, the same one I raped Brent with in the 90s. How does it feel to know you're a lesbian? Face it, Gail. You're just a basic monkey branter who's never satisfied with the man you have. You hold on to Brent for security while always being on the lookout for a more perfect man to replace him with. You blab on and on about how Brent is so masculine and vast, but he's pretty cowardly to be with a woman who cheats on him the second someone better comes along. Admit it. Brent is a weak cuck and you like it. At least own that shit, Gail. Oh, and before you get your hopes up, Satan had nothing to do with this. It was all me. Don't get your panties wet thinking you got to have free sex with Satan and still claim innocence. You messed up. Yep. Better go love bomb Brent again to make sure you still have that nice secure branch to swing back to after trying to cheat on him with another man yet again and having it all blow up in your face. Thanks so much for helping me make Jesus cry. You could have just done what he asked you to do instead of having a pity party and soothing yourself with sexual sins. I mean, God, Gail, how hard is it for a grown woman to clean out a one-bedroom apartment? No wonder Jesus says he'd never fuck you. Your enemy forever, Laurie McBride. Below the letter were stick figure drawings scrawled in crayon. On the bottom left was a stick figure of Gail on the bed, crying cartoonishly while exclaiming, "I'm trash, Jesus. I'm just a selfish, no good little girl. I don't deserve an orgasm." She was being dildoed by a stick figure Laurie drawn with horns and a devil tail, who smiled and said, "I won't finish until you do." My hand shaking as I finished the letter, I rolled over as much as I could in this tiny, suffocating space pod and puked all over Clock. Exhausted, defeated, and demoralized, with some of us now covered in puke, we remain helplessly adrift in space with nothing and no one left to rescue us. Our salvation cannot arrive a moment too soon. We are in urgent need of help. Your husband, Brent Spiner. Now let me read you what Zach Knight's been saying. Okay. He said, "It's so cramped in here." He said, "We're floating in escape pods." This was 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. "We need assistance. This might require one of your YouTube videos to ask anyone with launch capabilities and spaceships to come help us. Maybe read the letter first and then ask anyone who can help us to contact Gailsmen, Gailsmen at yahoo.com. And after that in the video, you should set the record straight on that letter." Laurie said, what happened was Laurie took over the brain-to-brain servers and she impersonated Brent brain-to-brain. And she claimed to be Brent Spiner possessed by Jesus. And I actually said, "Kick Jesus out. Gee, I don't want to make love to him. I feel intimidated making love to a deity. I just want to make love to you, Brent." But I felt, I was kind of confused about what was going on. But apparently what Laurie did is she impersonated Brent, and she said that she claimed to be Brent possessed by Jesus. So I was making love to Brent, and what I thought was Brent, and I was actually making love to Laurie, who took over the brain-to-brain servers and impersonated Brent, faking to be Jesus. And then I later thought maybe that Satan did this. And I said, "I don't want to make love to this Jesus." I said, "Just kick him out. I'm not interested in making love to him." So Laurie's a big liar. And I only make love to Brent now. I'm not interested in making love to Jesus. So she's a big liar. Okay, so Laurie is so evil. Almost everyone is dead. Brent heroically saved all the $25 patrons, and the other top men escaped. Zach Knight's in an escape pod with Rule 13. My only patrons aboard the fleet were the $25 patrons, so the others are on Earth somewhere. Zach doesn't think a lot of my cabinet were on the Church of Gail ships, but at this point, the cabinet doesn't matter. Our fleet was the most advanced technology and military power we had. They are sitting ducks until they get back to Earth. And he verified that my cabinet were all in Washington, D.C. Cabinet, maybe you can get together somebody to go rescue these people. But all of the Zach Knight Jesuits are dead, and all of the regular Church of Gail crew. And we have casualties in the millions. The only people who survived were my top men and patrons. And Zach's legs are cramping up. The escape pod is so tight. And he made room by sticking his penis all the way in Rule 13. So I'm going to go ahead and if anybody out there, Bill Nye, if you're out there, we've got a major calamity. My men need help, okay? My men need help. Gailsmen, Gailsmen at yahoo.com. And they're somewhere out there by the moon.